Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Optics in Action, where we spotlight leaders with vision and clarity. And I am honored today to have Tom Kereszti with us. He is the founder of Culture Force. And I'm super excited to have this conversation today. We've not talked before, but I've seen a lot about his background, and we've got these similar expat experiences. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of great insights as with your experience, Tom. So welcome to Optics in Action.
Ryan, the honor is all mine, please.
Awesome. I am sure our audience is going to get some great insights about leadership, being in the C-suite, and what you've learned along that journey around culture and how they can integrate that into their organization. First thing I love to ask guests is, why do you do what you do? Why did you found Culture Force? Why do you do it? And you could give us a little background about yourself and answer that question. We'd love it.
Culture was founded on the basic principle, and here's a real statistic. Just in the United States alone, we spend more than $50 billion on leadership training on an annual basis. Yet if you do survey after survey, and I don't care if it's Gallup or whose survey you're looking at, about 80%, I think 78 some odd percent of people leave their jobs because they don't like their bosses. They may like the company, they may love the job, but they don't like their bosses. And in fact, when I went through my career, from all the bosses that I had, there's probably three that I highly respect. And the rest of the bosses, I was always scratching my head, okay, why is it not the other way around? Why are they not reporting to me? But so we wanted to do something about that. And we have an idea at Culture Force that says, look, instead of putting more money down the drain in leadership training at the top level, why don't we look at the middle of the organization and have these self-led teams that are self-functional? I love to quote Warren Buffett one time said that he wants to invest in great companies with great brands that any dummy can run, because there's one day a dummy will. And that's really what happens with organizations. As you know, in the C-suite, you have a lot of guys come and go, and some are good leaders and some are not. So how do we sustain a culture inside of an organization that, regardless of who's at the top, you really have a great organization that's self-sustaining and self-led. So that's the idea behind Culture Force.
Wow, I love it. So your focus is really on the mid-level managers and making sure that the leadership is being developed at that level. So reducing turnover of lower level employees or folks at those levels. Did I catch that correctly, or am I going a different?
Well, no, that's 100% correct. There's a lot to it, but one of my founding partners there's three of us, and one of my founding partners is a retired Navy SEAL. And our Culture Pulse model is based on a Navy SEAL model. And here's the beautiful thing about the Navy SEALs, right? If one of the exercises they do, for example, is during the middle of a training exercise, they'll walk up to the platoon leader and say, "You're dead," right? It's called kill the leader. And now that leader gets to step back along with the rest of the training folks and see, how does that team behave? Who steps in? Who takes the lead? And when you look at that concept, you're in the middle of a battlefield, and it's a real situation, not only training, but it's a real situation where, there's a culture inside the Navy SEALs. There's a structure, but you're not asking for higher level direction. You're not asking for higher level permission. You're in the battlefield, and you have to take decisions that are life and death decisions, never mind business decisions that we're accustomed to. Those are life and death decisions, and they have to be made in a certain moment. And if the leader gets taken out, who's the next guy up? Who steps in? Who makes sure that whoever's left in that platoon gets home safe? So that's really what the Culture for business model is built on, is really the Navy SEALs model. So what makes us a little bit unique is we have that Navy SEAL background. And I met Kyle a number of years ago, and I was never part of the Navy SEALs, obviously. And I always had the idea that the Navy SEALs had this rough and tough. And I live in San Diego, which is the heart of Navy SEALs country, and doing butts training, you can hear bullets flying, and they're fake bullets that they shoot at the guys. And Hell Week is these guys are, and I know them, what they go through is just unimaginable to you and I. But I always had this concept that it's a rough and tough, and you do as we say, and you do, and it's nothing could be further from the truth. It's really about trust. It's about team building. It's about not one person, but it's a team as a whole. And that's really what I subscribe to. I'm a servant leader is how I describe myself. And that's a model that I subscribed to way back 20, 25 years ago. And as I rose in leadership roles, that's the model that I worked with. And
Yeah.
that's very similar to the Navy SEALs model. So Kyle and I came at it very differently from different backgrounds, but our philosophies are perfectly aligned.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. The pockets of trust within an organization of all sizes, whether it's a smaller organization, do people trust the people that they're working with and around them, or a larger organization where you have different locations and offices around the world, for example, that level of trust within a group and then between groups be, starts to really form the core of what the culture is really about. It's not about some slogan on the wall or a 3-sentence mission statement or something. How people really react in those moments when a leader leaves or when an employee leaves, how do we operate to keep moving forward in those moments? So I love that perspective, and I love that the visual that you shared. So what does that look like when you engage with an organization to, do you have some type of assessment or some way of looking at how are they operating today? How are those middle level management teams working today? And what level of leadership skills do they have? How do you go about assessing that?
We have a process. Before I share that process with you, let me just share one more story with you. Having lived in San Diego, I've, like I mentioned, I met a lot of Navy SEALs, including my niece's husband. And we actually had the entire Navy SEALs team over for dinner before they got deployed. And then we had them over for dinner after they returned from deployment. And by the way, as a side note, if you ever decide to invite a Navy SEAL team over your house, they will eat you and drink you out of your households.
I've got a little story about not Navy SEALs, but the Navy. When we lived in Singapore, my wife and I, when you live overseas, like when a U.S. Navy ship would come into port, there would go a message would go out through the American community. We hosted some sailors at our house, and
Good.
so they weren't SEALs, but they came over to our apartment, swam in our pool. We had a barbecue. They messed around, played with the kids and stuff, and it was really an interesting perspective on our military around the world and the things we learned. But they definitely could eat, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the point I was trying to make was, look, from all the Navy SEALs that I met, nobody jumped off the page to me and said, man, this guy is absolutely brilliant. He's the most brilliant person I've ever met in my life. On the contrary, they're just a bunch of regular guys. Now, don't get me wrong. All these regular guys are extremely smart. They're extremely driven beyond what you and I could comprehend to get through that SEAL training. And I can share with you some statistics on how many people try out for the SEALs and how many people actually make it. So they're very smart. They have an absolute trust with each other that's just amazing. I learned a phrase from them: say, I trust you with my life and I trust you with my wife. Right. So they really trust each other. And that's really the model that we work with organizations. So we can go into an organization and we can just take a bunch of ordinary, regular people, which most of us are. We don't have a lot of superstars in our team. So they're a bunch of regular people, and we get them to really unite around a common vision, just like the SEALs are united around a common vision, create the culture, get them to trust each other. And then these teams become self-led and they become highly functional. So just taking ordinary people. So how do we do that? There's a number of methodologies to do that. So one is, and it just depends on what type of engagements, what type of budgets the customers have. Some people just come in and say, hey, can you guys do a workshop for us? And we can do workshops. Can you come do a mastermind? We have some canned stuff that we can come in, or they say, look, we don't know what's going on with our organization. Can you come take a look? In that case, we have some assessment tools. We have a great AI tool that actually runs in the background. It's not another software you have to implement. It can just take, like, literally, we would have a Zoom meeting. We could put this thing to recording, and then it records in the background, and it spits out live information to say, okay, Ryan, what you said wasn't really in line with the culture. You could have said it maybe a little bit differently. So it gives live feedback, not to punish people, but just to say, look, we build a culture model in that software tool, and then it just runs in the background, whether it's on Slack, whether it's on team meetings, Zoom, whatever, and it just gives feedback to say, okay, how are you guys living it? And then we usually take a qualitative approach to that as well. Usually what we find with larger organizations, especially, is that there is a culture, right? There's a culture that they would like to have inside their organization. Most larger organizations do have that. If they don't, I don't know how they got to be a large organization in the first place. But what you find is inside that organization, it's working real well in certain places, and it's not working so well in certain places. So you look and say, okay, where's it working? Where's it not working? Where it's working, we do some qualitative stuff to say, okay, what's happening here? Where is it one person? Are they doing something differently? Why is it working so great over there and maybe not working so well somewhere else? And then we do a report back to the leadership of that company to say, okay, it's working great here and this is what they're doing. And then we have really a recommended forward action that basically says, okay, this is how we think we can go about it. And then obviously we give them tools. We show that to them. So it's like we're a third party. So we don't come in and actually run the organization. We show them what would be best, and then we don't just leave them alone like a lot of consultants say, good luck. So we check in with them like maybe every 3 months, maybe every 6 months, and do just like kind of a beat on the pulse to say, okay, how's it going? Is it going in the right direction, et cetera? So we don't have engagements that are 10-year engagements with companies. And we're also not a quick fix. Like I said, we have some workshops that, look, if you know 100% that this is one problem that you want to work on, we have a workshop for that.
Yeah.
Right, from the Navy SEALs model, including we can put you on a plane, bring you to San Diego, throw you on the beach, and shoot fake bullets at you. so we can do it all.
So I asked. So the question I asked, I love the way that you answered it. So the question I asked was, do you have some type of assessment to look at the folks and their leadership skills and level? And that story that you shared led to the Navy SEALs are ordinary folks. They're smart folks. They're talented. They're dedicated. They're all those things. But you're taking ordinary folks and walking them through a process to enable them to up-level their skills and engage them in some things to understand the trust that the Navy SEALs have to have. How do you engage that? I love that perspective that you shared. One of the things we often talk about here is the alignment of people and process. And so when you talk about culture, you talk about people and leadership skills and training and this Navy SEALs training, there's a lot of stuff around the people, but there's also some processes. When I think about the Hell Week or the things that the Navy SEALs go through, there's a process, there's a methodology, there's a rationale or a reason behind it. If you think about it in that perspective, when you're taking an ordinary person and you're thinking about what are we doing in that process of the Navy SEAL sort of training that folks go through, how does that work together?
Look, we get bogged down in the terminology that says training, right? We envision training of putting people in a classroom or something like that. But look, there's many ways to train. In fact, we had this discussion. We were sitting down with a bunch of senior C-suite guys in New York City. And one of the questions was, it's so rigorous to continue to training people, such a big investment. Well, look, there's many ways to train people, right? So for example, one way to train people is just put them on a project and let them fail and see what they learn. That's part of training, right? Part of training is, if you look at the Navy SEALs, every day during BUDS, they fail. It's designed for failure. It's designed to break those human elements down. And the guys that, last and graduate from Navy SEALs, they failed every day, but they figured out a way to get out of it and how to overcome those failures. So that's part of training in an organization, right? If you set up a process, if you set up a structure, there's a safety net for people to fail and for people to try and for people to learn. That's part of training. It's not a course 101 that they stick you into, and then you graduate from 101 and you go to 102. There are those that as well, but that's also part of training, right? Part of training is not only failure, but let you take a leadership role, right? They're going to stick you in that. Now you don't have that permanent position. We didn't give you a promotion. We didn't give you a title. We didn't give you a salary. And by the way, if that's what you're looking to be a leader, think again, because that whole thing passed you by. But okay, on a temporary basis, you lead this project. Okay, now you lead this project. Actually, people are not reporting to you. Maybe you have a cross-functional team, and then you have to lead all those people and pull all those strings and all those parts together. That's also part of training. So you can't just lock yourself into say, okay, training, we're going to stick you in a course, you're going to go to this conference for a month, or you're going to go to this workshop. And then when you come out of it, oh boy, you got it.
You're gonna magically be trained now, right? You're ready to be a
No.
leader. No,
So it's a process.
yeah, I completely agree with that. It's one of our core values. And our team, every Monday morning, I have my team. We have Monday morning weekly kickoff, and one of our core values is acknowledge failure, learn from it, and adapt. And we start with that acknowledge failure. And I often ask people, and I do it myself as well. We actually talk about one of our failures, one of our recent failures, that as an organization or as an individual. And I've had people acknowledge things, and I've acknowledged things to my team that, hey, this was something I invested in and it didn't work out. Here's what I learned from it. And here's what I'm going to do differently moving forward. And being able to do that at all levels in organization, I think is really essential to building trust. And I know my team appreciates it. And I imagine that as you're working with organization, that creating a culture where people can fail, learn from it, pick themselves up, and keep moving on is essential to us as humans, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And when you ask, okay, so what do we do when we go into inside of an organization? We look at all those things, and we have to make sure that those processes that are inside that organization support whatever their culture is. And I don't know what their culture is. We just happen to talk about a culture that allows people to fail. That was just one example, but in that particular example, you also have to have an incentive, money incentive, right? So you have to say, okay, I'm going to incentivize people to try. I'm not going to punish people for failure, but I'm going to incentivize for people to try. Yeah. Okay. So if you make the same stupid mistake 10 times, then there should be some consequences, right? But it all together, right? It also goes together on how do you put a team together?
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate of diversity, but in diversity of the mind, not diversity of skin color, not diversity of gender, but diversity of mind. We have a habit of surrounding ourselves with like individuals because we think alike, we get along, we look at the world the same, so we become good buddies. But that's really the worst thing you can do. So when you put a team together, you have to make sure that you have a very diverse thinking team. Now, some like a guy from Latin America is going to view the world are different than a guy from Germany, right? So there's going to be some diverse thinking there as well, right? But you want to put a bunch of minds in a room that are very diverse. And then the second challenge is to make sure that they can work together, team, trust each other, and actually appreciate each other's talents. You know, I use myself as an example. When I was early on as an executive, I had no time. I said, man, you guys are procrastinating. Let's just do it. Because I'm an action guy, right? I got to do it. I'm one of those action oriented guys. And then after a while, it dawned on me that these people are not procrastinating. It's just highly analytical. They need more data points. Right? Now, on the contrary, if you stick everybody in a room who's highly analytical, they will never make a
They'll
decision.
never do
They will
anything.
never go, because they just analyze the crap out of everything, right?
Yeah.
Or you get a bunch of guys like me in the room. We'll just, okay, let's go. Okay, we did it. We implemented it September 1st. Oh shit, it was the wrong thing. So
I get it.
you got to get diversity. You got to get diverse minds in this in the room.
Yeah, no, I think that respect for different cultures and opinions and builds trust. And I know, like, when I was living in the Philippines, for example, I would get comments from people, maybe, oh, their culture is this way or that way. But when I was living there, I thought, but if you understand the culture and you understand some of the reasons behind what's motivating people to do the things they're doing, you can be so much more impactful and powerful in getting the right people in the right seats, getting them all going in the same direction. And you can make things happen that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do just by sitting around in your own individual culture and trying to do it your way. So I think that's a really great insight. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I was as part of the Wharton Fellows. We were out in Seattle one time, and we were talking to Starbucks. And this was about the time, I guess it was about early 2000. Starbucks was looking to expand globally. They had a huge footprint in the United States, and they were starting to go globally. So we went to visit a number of companies, including Costco and Microsoft that was up in the Seattle area. But Starbucks actually said, look, we got a bunch of smart guys in the room, so let's ask them some questions. So they asked us some questions about what they should be doing going internationally. And I look at the world very simple. So I just looked at their annual report and I looked at all their leadership, and their leadership was like, you could just tell by the like Jack Smith or in what all like waspy names. I suggested, look, if you guys want to go international, you better get a couple of guys on your board on your leadership team that are last name Rodriguez or Helmuth or whatever, because with this mindset, there's no way in heck you're going to be successful internationally because you've got a Northern American mindset just by who's on your team.
Yeah.
And Oren Smith looked at me like I had three heads, but so I don't know if my suggestion came through or not, but it was just like so obvious to me that they didn't have a diverse team.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt that appreciating those foreign cultures and getting to understand that is critical for global success. Hey, Tom, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on this episode of Optics in Action. And I'm sure our audience would love to learn more from you. They might want to reach out. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you to learn more about Culture Force or to learn more about some of those things we talked about today?
Well, Culture Force Team, that's our website. Culture Force Team is pretty straightforward. And I have a very unique last name, Kereszti. If you looked on LinkedIn, you'll find me and my daughters. That's about it. And just, yeah, either Kereszti or Culture Force, you'll land on us sooner or later. LinkedIn is the easiest.
Fantastic. Thank you again for being a guest today on this episode of Optics in Action. Appreciate your time, Tom.
Thank you, Ryan.